rent parties. When I was a kid, money was so tight that people had to pay first, current, and last money, and then steal a month rent. Landlords were pretty generous, except companies, but individual owners. And we had lots of people had no source of income whatsoever in the neighborhood. They still were. We went out and stole vegetables and things like that. I was part of a gang that helped those individuals, those poor people, old ladies and things like that. Well, people also came up. Nobody had the money to buy a house. It was a rental development, a very good one, by the way. The houses are worth $1 million now. And then my dad could have bought one for $6,000. And I don't know, it would have been 5 or 6 bedrooms. My mother wanted it. My dad hit the ceiling. He said, "Don't you see all those poor people there?" He said, "A lot of them that don't have any income, but they have the house. And they rent it from the real estate company, even though their name is on the ownership, but it's rent. And they can't get enough money to even pay the interest. So this is pretty standard, by the way. You would find notes, usually handwritten, rent party tonight, such and such a street, address, and it would say free, or it's have a good time. And then they put down Alley Cat Jones and his three bandsmen will play for dancing. Okay, we got a party coming up. You go over in your average day clothes, very nice. You were expected to pay to get in. And the prices, usually it was give what you have. If you didn't have anything, nobody got mad. But we're talking a quarter to, God knows, $1 to get in these apartments. Usually we'd go to the basement of the building, and the alley cats would play for us, and they would dance, the older folks, and everybody that could brought something. They brought a jar of pickles, homemade pickles. They didn't buy much or current things like cakes or pies, because the current stuff wasn't common. These were like cans they just hidden away. You would get pickles, a whole flock of things, and they would turn it in a can of beans, for example. But mostly, the quarters or 50 cents is, you'd buy them, and the money would pile up. Now, when the party was over, remember, that's 10, 11 o'clock at night, then you count the money up. And I would say that the average rent party drew, maybe in the course of the whole evening, 35, 40 neighbors. And you would get about $15. I'm guessing now. I got no figures. $15 from the sale of homemade pickles, and you paid maybe they would ask you to contribute and a quarter to a dollar, and lo and behold, you come up with, let's say, $15, $18 or $20. I can tell you what our rent was. We had a 3-bedroom house, 1 bath. These were big bedrooms. Kitchen, dining room, a huge one, huge parlor. And my mother hit the ceiling when my father moved us to an identical apartment, but when he was looking where schools were. We were paying $27 a month, and my dad rented this apartment identical for $32. I thought she was going to crown my dad, and not with gold. She could have She said, I can feed the family for a week for $5. I think she could have. When she got hold of a nickel, that Indian was pulling the buffalo's ears and riding them. But at any rate, at the rent party, that was a place to meet people, the neighbors, and dance. And if you went to the Aragon, that's $5 to get in to dance. And if you go to a local bar, they got combos sometimes. That costs you got to buy a beer. But nobody urged you to do anything at a rent party. If you didn't have any money, you were still welcome. And I would say that 90% of the rent parties made the goal. Enough money to give them a month's grace or two, renting. I didn't miss any that I could have missed as a kid. And they were all really neighbors. And there was no regular food or anything like that. It was just go to the basement and women got all the gossip. Now, they were funny. My folks weren't much for rent parties, mainly because they didn't speak the various languages. I don't ever remember a Swedish language one. The majority were Poles, mainly because Polish was the average person in the area. And but I remember French people and Germans, a lot of them, and they were all of them were immigrants. Very few women spoke English. My friends' mothers were every nationality. But that rent party, it wasn't formal, but you better have, after you've had one, it was successful, don't go looking to have another very soon. Nobody would have showed up. But most of them were successful. The kids would talk. It isn't the folks. The kid, how did the party go? And they'd say, oh my gosh, Mama's so happy. She got 2 months' rent. She got $38 last night. And so Mama would have 2 months' rent in her hands. And that amounted to generally, I would say the average rent in the neighborhood was $20-some. But $32, oh boy. My folks went once in a while because it was kind of obligatory to go. I have no idea what my dad contributed. I would doubt that he would. Had to get permission from my mother to drop $3 or $4 into it. But he was one of the larger contributors when he went. They were always glad to see him come because he put in bills. I'll bet you sometimes the spendthrift daddy I had gave him $5 if he had $5. But they were fun parties. I liked them. And there was no, opium or nothing attached to going or not going. It wasn't a duty. You just did. Nobody criticized. There were failures. If you weren't very liked in the neighborhood, a rent party wasn't a way to make any money. In fact, if you think about it, there was no money at all to be made. The only thing was to get enough money to pay that month's rent, and maybe if you paid a second month, that was rare, but usually somehow a job came up. Now, a lot of the jobs came up were day jobs. In fact, most of them. There'd be a gas station, say, help wanted, and you'd go and ask them. Now, I'm talking for other people. What you want? We want the drive cleaned. They'd have to sweep the drive, sprinkle gasoline on it, and brush that off. A lot of dust, because a lot of construction, a lot of dirt. And then wash it down with a hose. And the gas station guy would give them a couple of bucks. And if they were big stations, and you knew everybody. If you went there and got a day job, you did what I just described. But you were trusted enough that if a car drove up, you went over and washed his windshield, and sometimes open the hood and turn a hose on the engine, take the dirt, mud out and stuff. They were rare. You had to trust somebody and pump gas for them. And people stole just as they do today. People haven't changed any. They were the same. There were the crooks in the neighborhood. But most people were churchgoers, like, I'll laugh, like the Bible Belt here in Pensacola. That's the only thing that connects them. Our telephone area was called Pensacola. That's how I knew to spell it when we came here, Pensacola. But that's kind of funny. People stayed in that neighborhood. There was not the transiency that there were in most places, mainly because there were lots of two-bit jobs that, like I just described, kids work. They don't work today. 18-year-olds, I know several, and not one of them has a job at 18. I had a job, 30 hours, 10 cents an hour, when I was 10, 11 years old, working in a soda fountain, sweeping floors, picking papers up. My dad got it for me because my mother wanted to know where I was. And where could she find it better than have me working in a soda fountain on the corner? And I worked too. And I worked. I was making a man's full pay. And this helped. When I was 13, I was a big kid, 6 foot tall, over about 150, 180 pounds, football. And I worked for a soda fountain. Well, I worked as a cook for my 12th year. My 10th and 11th, I had a soda fountain behind the soda. That was a nice job, except there was no air conditioning anywhere except maybe the movies. And I would get so hot behind that soda fountain that I determined I wasn't going to do it. So I was brilliant me. I got a job as a cook. And we had a menu like this place around here, these little dog joints. There were no dog joints around. Then with all these fast food short order places here, we got a dozen within a mile or two. You had little Greek restaurants or Italian restaurants, one room in a building. And I worked in a barbecue stand. I managed it at 13, but I learned that working over a stove in a Chicago summer without air conditioning, and I got 2 bits an hour, by the way, that was, well, it was a low starting salary for a man. A full salary for a day, most jobs paid 50 cents an hour. And for that, I'm talking framing carpenters, sewer workers. The most important thing was not the salary, was that the guy who hired you didn't go bankrupt or run with your money. That happened to the school teachers and railroads. So that was larceny was abundant, but I got 50 cents an hour when I'm 14, and I was a crew manager for about 10 men, putting up carnivals and taking them down. And I was so big, and my friends who were also crew managers would back me if anything happened. I got very little trouble from anybody. I could look at them. If they were treating me like a kid, you're fired. And they were fired. The management backed me to the hilt. They fired them. Nobody wanted to lose a 50 cent an hour job. That's 20 a week. But they would try to get 2 jobs. But 20 a week, $80. And that was those that were lucky enough to know politicians could get on what they called relief help. And the maximum was $50. But if you got a $20 a week job, that beat the hell out of relief. You went out and you raked leaves. They called it WPA, Works Progress Administration. It was government funded. And that paid $51. Here I am, a 13, 14-year-old kid, and I'm making $20 a week and going to high school. That's for 2 days, really, I worked. And in the summer, though, it was bonanza. I learned quickly the problems of these carnivals. They had things. That's why a lot of these guys couldn't job. By the way, I'll mention it. It wasn't that they were so lazy, sort of thing. they couldn't speak English and couldn't help and couldn't get a job. The gangs, Well, I didn't speak Polish very well. I hand in arm, and I spoke German fairly well because of school. I was taking it full time. But I worked in a carnival, and I had money to go to rent parties. I was the richest kid in Chicago. I worked for a guy who was an honest God angel. He hired high school kids as managers and college boys out to get a job with him. People would practically kill steamboat carnivals. And I kept raising, and finally, I remember a week when I worked like a dog Saturday and Sunday, Monday. When it came payday on next Friday, $500. I was making about 75 cents an hour. That was unheard of. And for a kid, my dad didn't make that kind of money. I was very careful not to let people know that I had that money. I socked it. I didn't know how to go to a bank or anything. I put it between the pages of last year's school books in the house and stuck it in my bookcase. I saved a lot of money up. I used a lot of it in college. When I went to school, I worked 10 seasons in a carnival, and I did every job in that carnival. I negotiated contracts. I drove a truck, a big one, loaded with carnival stuff. I hired and fired my crew. I didn't handle money. That was paid, that went to the company. But I remember that this is rumor. I'm making part of this up, but the rumor was I liked this one girl, and her father didn't like me because I think he got mixed up with somebody else. He had put out the word he didn't want her going with her, me to go with her, because I looked like I was a young scoundrel doing nothing. If he didn't even know I worked in a carnival, though he did later, and that was worse. But it was an honest place and good people. And from a carnival, my mother was so scared that people would know that I even knew about a carnival. And if they asked her what I did, where did I always have money? And I'd be carrying around $25. And my mother would say, he works for a construction company. She wouldn't say carnival. She couldn't even get the word out. She was sure that there were floozies there. There were no floozies. And at 14, 15, I wouldn't have known about floozies anyway. Who will use the word floozy today? They used it then. But we wouldn't go long distances and sell them overnight. Sometimes I would drive a truck half the night to get home and go to work the next day. But if I did that, money coming to me went up. I got more. It was fun. I lived the top of the world. I was the richest kid in Chicago and nobody knew it. And what did I want? A car. There was only one car on my block. It came out on Sunday. They didn't drive it very far. Gasoline, like today, was exorbitant. Why, there were, and because it wasn't too bad someplace, you could buy leadless, no lead, 12 gallons for $1. 12 gallons, 8 cents, like for a gallon of gas. Oil was expensive, 20 cents, 30 cents a quart at Sears. So I wanted a car, and I had, would you believe, 6,000 books tucked away. And some weeks I made 100, some weeks 40, some weeks I always got my base pay. I got up to $1 an hour at the Carnival finally. And I was managing a whole bunch of them. Now, what did managing make? Well, hire and fire, and you got to know how to put it up. You had to know how to build a carnival and take one down. All the equipment would go to a couple of trucks. But loading those trucks, every inch had been afore, and it was identified by these colored little flags that held. They were called Bally Cloths, and every year you got a different Bally cloth. Some of them very fancy. They were the ones you put on the booths and the tables around the edges, and the Bally cloths were identified by the number of stripes on them. Say you got a collie cloth had a blue stripe, inch stripe, and then it would be a red, and then a blue, and then a blue, and then a red, and that would be 1935 August. And it would say, the last Bally would, if it had to be there, it was good canvas. You put up the canvas and you read these Bally cloths. This is a 14 by 24 food tent. And we had big tops, oh boy, about 40 feet long. And I knew I could read every Bally. Some of those people who couldn't even read English don't even say. They never understood what a Bally cloth did. And it also told you in the trucks where the parts go, the canvas and stuff. And these people, they just couldn't learn. And they were in and out like flies. They didn't want to quit 25 cents to 50 cents an hour. But I didn't want them on my crew. I had some pretty good men working for 50 cents an hour. And I could take a crew out in the morning and put up 2 carnivals or take one down. And we had to take them down. That's the hardest thing and the most dangerous. But nobody ever got hurt on mine. We make a lot. Most of our customers were Catholic churches making money to run their schools, American Legion posts to buy a war veteran statue or something. Outside, occasional. I don't think maybe in all those years there were over 5 Protestant churches with running carnivals. Small towns in the area. Chamber of Commerce used to run what they call a a merry-go-round, uh, what they called a Ferris wheel. It wasn't a Ferris wheel to us. I knew another name, and maybe a flying horse or something like that. Then they would cost a dime to ride, and we would give them 20. We'd give them 20 open booths, built of 2x4s in canvas. We rented them like $10 a night. It was a gold mine. And then after that, other arrangements. Money split. They ran their own carnivals. We didn't help them to even sell a ticket. And if they wanted shows, occasionally you could rent shows. And they made their own deals. 50% to the church, 50% to the show. And they had floozies. But they never mixed with us. We were construction and takedown. And I knew it. Only the boss, his two sons, me, and one or two others knew the codes and how to use them. So I was very valuable. Here you got 5, 6 trucks out with a guy running them and don't know how to open and close them. Huh, I did. I could put up a whole carnival myself, lots of tricks in a day, even a big top by myself. And they rewarded me very well. If my mother knew or dad knew I had that kind of money, they'd have fainted. I didn't tell anybody, and I didn't splurge on it. No new clothes except for college when I went there. I worked 10 seasons for them. So I went into the Army. Okay, I got a present. That was great. Then I got to leave. 2 weeks. And I didn't have any money. I was in Kansas. I had just about enough for train fare home. Big cost, like $5, $6. But on the kind of money privates in the Army made, that's a lot of money. And I got home and sat around for 2 days. My dad would say, "Why don't you go out? Have a beer, meet the boys." I said, "There are no boys here, Dad. They're all in the Army. I don't like beer." Oh. So he said, "Why don't you get a job?" I said, "For 2 weeks?" He said, "Get anything, get a day job." They were available here and there. Now I went down to the Carnival place and I met the owner, and he greeted me with open arms. And he said, I told him I could be in for 10 days with him. "Could you use me?" I thought he was going to kiss me. He had contracts and nobody to carry him out. Money going down the drain that he couldn't see. So he said, "Oh, yeah," he said. "I got a big crew going out to, I forget where, 3 shows in one lot." He said, "Well, can you help it?" "Sure, I know." So he and his 2 sons and I went out. On a Monday, we put up that whole damn carnival. And so the time came. I worked on about 10 of them. And the time came when I left and went back to the Army. And he had maybe 30, 40 men. And he paid in cash, which is what the people wanted. Most of them didn't know how to write a check anyway. but they didn't have bank accounts. They wanted cash or liquor if they were the bums. But you lined up, and the paymaster, that's the old man's daughter, would call your name out. Lincoln, first name. And you come up and sign your name. I never knew anybody in civilian life that couldn't write their name. I knew them in the Army, illiterates, but not in civilian. Just, you'd sign for the cash. You got cash. Don't even think about a check. They didn't know what to do with it. And they would get cash for what they did. Well, you went back and stood in line again. Because once in a while, he'd say, everybody stay. And it was true. He said, we had a tough week. You worked a lot of overtime. Open an envelope, $5 in it, like that. Wow. God, 10 hours pay. You get a $5 bill or something like that. So I came, he called my name. They're all standing around waiting to have the old man say, go on and paint up the house, you know. And I got to open an envelope. And I don't know how much I made, but I worked a lot of hours. And then I had a second envelope. And it says, from LJ. I opened it, $500. I looked at it, and I said, the guy made a mistake. I got a bonus. So I waited. The guys around me were, I don't think any of them had ever seen 100. And I got $500. And I went up and I said, Mr. Thibault, you made a mistake. And he said, you worked around here for 8 years, and you think I make mistakes? And he bawled the hell out of me in front of all these men. But it didn't do any good. The men knew I had that money. And about half of them wanted to borrow some. Ha, ha, ha. Your chances of getting a nickel from me ran from 0 to none. And I was a big boy, a tackle on the football team. And weekends, I was in the Carnivals. But when there wasn't a carnival to work on a weekend, in the fall, it was getting cold. I played football, professional, for a Bear Farm Club. My folks, again, did not know. My dad bought me a complete football outfit down in the ghetto at Maxwell Street. I had the best equipment in the high school, but I played at night for a Bear Farm Club. The merchant sponsored it, and the Chicago Bears sent players over and a coach. I got the same pay when I played. I didn't get to play every day. They were testing new guys all the time. Most of them better and bigger even than I was. But if I played, if I showed on a call, it was worth $100. So I showed up. If I played, it was $150. And if I started, $250. That's the same bear amount of money that the big bears got. Can you imagine that kind of money today? I knew Sid Luckman, the quarterback, very well. And the paper said, Luckman is getting $10,000 a year. So he was a quarterback of the Bears. I didn't know how much 10,000 was. I had a couple of thousand in my books then, but 10,000? My old man made about 2,500, 3,000. We were considered rich, steady job, and he made bonuses and things. I don't think, though, that we had $40 a week. And I wasn't working. If I worked one night, and the time, I made 280 bucks. Wow. And didn't know how to spend it. Can you? I'm 16 years old about that time, 17. I didn't have a girl. No time taken out. I didn't drink, except beer, and I don't like beer. I didn't go out. I would drink soda pop while the other guys drank beer. The rest of the crew was a lot older than I was. And I didn't smoke. I was an athlete. So what could I spend money for? All I could do with it is stick it in the books and hold on to it and hope my folks didn't find out, because I wanted a car. And I trusted my folks. They wouldn't steal it, I don't think. But I don't know. I had as much money, enough to buy the house if I wanted, and my dad did not want the house. Period. But by the time I got to college, my dad said, where do you want to go to school? And I said, I'll go to Wright College. He said, what? Wright College was a city college. And I had all this money, but the tuition was zero for Chicago graduates. I got free. Books were $2, lunches were 19 cents, and I could walk to school. So I went to college at Wright for free. And I wanted to laugh. The reason I went, the coach wanted me. And, the people, the coaches and emissaries came around the house. So you ought to go to Zippo College. They give you a scholarship. There was always hangers on. It wasn't something that I didn't like. But I had a good buddy in high school, and he got a scholarship to Monmouth, a football scholarship. And the coach always said, do you know anybody, who wants to go? So he recommended me. I was third in my class, so academically, no problem. I got a full scholarship and a job. Pay everything. That's what I thought. It didn't. But I had so much money. And I spent it, but not a car, not that. I bought things in college, a lot of clothes, a lot of stuff. I knew I was going to go in the Army or someplace. Might as well spend it. Boy, that was fun. But the only time I've ever been a millionaire in my life, well, in Paris I was a millionaire. But here I am, college kid with probably more money than any professor in the campus. But they didn't pay in cash. I got food. and a place to stay. College paid my rent, $2 a week. And I had a job too in the college. Fire the girls' dormitory there. Big, shovel a mechanical monster, it was fun. I enjoyed that year and a half at Monmouth like nothing I ever enjoyed before. I had time. I could go out with girls. But there, in Monmouth, Illinois, there were two movie theaters owned by the same guy next door to each other. The owner was the son, he was the son of the guy that owned the theaters. If you wanted to go to a show, you could sneak in for nothing. But they had some summers and some weeks they had a tent roller rink, $1 to go roller skating, but they furnished the skates, of course. In Chicago, it was about $1 to get with skates, but I had my own fancy roller skates. Ran $20. What the hell? It's just money. But if you took a girl out, well, let's put it this way. Monmouth has more churches than bars. It was religious like this town is. Everywhere you looked was a church. And at Monmouth, I almost dropped. I have to go to church every day. Every single day but Saturday. 1 hour between 11 and 12, something like that. But it was a college newspaper then. They had announcements they had a short sermon and a song, and the acrobats and the singers all performed for us every day. It was fun. Chapel. I went to chapel every day, but here I am. But it was my own fault. I wanted to go to church every day. When I found it, I was already too deep. I couldn't get out of the scholarship or I'd never get another anyplace. I went, and I enjoyed chapel, but I didn't think of every day. They don't do it anymore. In fact, every president of the college and most of the professors were also ministers. And you behaved at Monmouth. Being caught on the campus with alcohol was instant dismissal. If a girl came in after midnight, she was sent home. A little town, 10,000, and more churches and taverns. Don't even think of going to college and going to a tavern. It was anti-alcohol, anti-smoking. And I mean anti. You could get thrown out. So I studied. It was good. Boy, it was peaceful. Then coming from a big city and going to most of the town was supported by farmers. 10,000, but can you imagine? Just the two theaters and some bars, and that was the entertainment in town. So if you went on a date, they knew where you're going. There were only 4 places in town that you could get anything to eat. A drugstore and 2 restaurants, one a very good one, and the other okay. and a diner in a real old dining car. So you took the girl out, and if you were rich, you ordered first. Oh, I'll have your special. How much is it? 39 cents. Okay. I'll have the same from the girl. The girl's dormitory food was as bad as some of the food around here in the South. And were they happy to go out? The Army was already draining guys out of school. Not the number of men went from a plus to a minus. But I had a girl off and on, and I had money. We went out. Occasionally, there'd be, not always, they didn't even serve steaks every day at the restaurant. But it was a good one. But I'd take the girl out. Would you like to have a good steak? Would they? They probably never had one. These are all farm girls practically in college. I liked it. And I got good grades. And when I was overseas, and on the front, I remember thinking, I was in my Foxhole with my buddy, and he said, "What are you thinking about?" Oh, yeah, boom! We actually got bounced around. Nothing hit us. I was thinking about college. He hadn't gone to school, college. What about? I said, it's so peaceful. I said, it's so quiet. They didn't have cars. There were hardly any students that owned a car. It was small. You could walk to town. So Monmouth was quiet. And I was thinking, boy, if I ever get back there, I won't leave it. Well, of course I did. I went back, got a taste of Chicago again, and I had all the small town I wanted for a long time. I didn't go back to live. I graduated there, but I wouldn't have stayed for anything. A few of my classmates did, but the town is still about that 11,000 something, but it was quiet, and I almost got married, but got enough sense to stay away from it at that time. This is after the war. Yeah, it was fun, and that was my teenage years. Now I played football. But I'm playing football now for a college. I remember when I reported in, it was the last season they played football for the next 4 years. The Army had taken all the talent. My coach looked at this monster, me, and he said, "What do you play?" And I said, "Tackle." I think he smiled from here to California. Oh, boy. Yeah. What could you do in Monmouth? You could study. We did. I did. It was hard work. But I still had some money left from my carnival days. I guess I might have had. I left it at home in war bonds, which didn't pay anything. It took 25 years or something to cash one in at like 4%. that was nothing. And the bond cost, it was a thief. The government was stealing from the people, and worse, from the soldiers. Yeah. I don't know what. Are you all through? You ought to come in. We're making this thing. Yeah. You know, the government made the soldiers pay for their own war. They ran the biggest scam I ever heard of. The country's U.S. government at the head of the crooks. You got paid, let's take me, a private, $50 a month. Sounds pretty good. That's as much as they got in civilian life for a job there. Well, we got sent to France. And money, French money, was like 10 francs for $1. Well, if you wanted to get a drink in a bar, it might cost you 100 francs. That'd be $10 American if you cashed your money into francs, or they paid you in francs. I would get $50 in francs, 5,000 francs, or 500 of them. That would make me about one good meal. Then the government then would be really paying me $10 a month for being in the front lines. There were more tricks that the Democrats did, and the soldiers got zilch. The only one that made any money was the Navy. Poor bastards. They went into the Pacific and barely got seen again. The only thing they could buy a few shipboard articles. So if a sailor went in, he'd come out with money after he'd been at sea for a year or two. He hadn't spent any. Where the hell was he going to spend it? He was the same boat I was in college. You're getting money. No. I came out of the Army and I had, I would say, available cash, maybe $1,000. Easy, I could have got more in a bank. But I didn't know any better. I was just glad to be home. But they were happy years. I didn't have, well, there was an Englishman that I read. He wrote English American, incidentally, and I don't remember what his name was, or is, that he said, all men are models of desperation. All men are desperate. I didn't know what he meant. I was a guy that wasn't desperate. I had enough money, and in college I had a girl. I wasn't desperate. Yeah. I've been desperate at times, but not often. By the way, I never heard of another rent party after the war. Never. In that neighborhood, everybody had a job. The GIs coming home the top was rushed off into schools. Like me, I didn't want a job. I didn't take a job from anyone. There were more jobs than people, but which makes for a very nice economy. And you figure that the GI Bill was handling a few million veterans. They were high. Figure that you had a few million maybe people working for the government. So the Eisenhower years were bonanza. People made more money than they could spend, which is very good. Yeah. My folks, not my dad, my mother, bought a house. My dad squealed, but he went to live there. It was a very nice house my mom bought. And she had all that money saved under the mattress. Hooray, Mom. That house is worth so much today that I'll bet you could get $1 million for it in that neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, 2 baths. That was a big house in Chicago. And compared to living in the apartments that we lived in, a mansion in a good neighborhood too. My mom was smart.